I do want to remind you that the meeting will be live streamed and recorded as well. Can you all hear me? I don't understand why I'm not seeing my face and I'm seeing a participant's face on the screen. That shouldn't be the case. Lily, do you mind turning off your camera because you're also on the live stream and switching it on again? Just turn it off, okay? So it's not happening. That's interesting. Let me do this then. Okay, now you can see me. Lily, you're welcome to turn your camera on. It won't be on the live stream. Yay. Unless you want to, and then you're very welcome to be on the live stream. Just let me know. So yeah, start thinking of questions you have and start typing them in the chat. We're gonna start in 1 minute. Was this the talk that she did in this trauma event, Lily? Right. I didn't catch all of them. I'm taking my own advice and not binge watching. So I'm only doing a few sessions and then I'm going to get the rest of them later. There we go. Patricia's in the house. Hello, Patricia. With 1 minute to go, I've gotten people to type, let me pin you instead.
Thank you.
I've got people to start typing in the chat their questions. Okay,
Welcome.
and we're on time. I'm gonna press record. Let me remove my pin. Okay, so hello everybody and welcome to today's Q&A session with Patricia Aguirre. For those of you that don't know Patricia already, she is a therapist, very good one, a yoga teacher, and she's a specialist in developmental trauma. So she integrates her knowledge and experience of 20 plus years on Eastern philosophies with trauma-sensitive methods such as transactional analysis, systemic therapy, and emotionally focused therapy. And she's also who younger yogis and older yogis like me want to be when we grow up. I'm Virginia. I'll be your tech host for this session. And please message me if you have any problems on Zoom. For those of you who are here, that means you have the all access pass, which is a very good thing to do with over 70 something, 80 something talks to watch. So you can watch them in your own time. Please keep your cameras on if possible. It's useful for presenters, for Patricia to see your state as well. If you do want to unmute, you're very welcome. Just raise your electronic hand and I will let you unmute and speak your question. But bear in mind that this session is being recorded and live streamed. Of course, you can always type your question in the chat and we will get to it. If you're watching a replay, remember there is still time to get the all access pass. The links will be posted everywhere, including Facebook. You'll be getting them through emails to register. And do share this. There is still time. Don't wait until next week when it's over. Think of one person that a friend, a colleague, maybe a relative, though family can be weird, but think of one person that you could share this with that will thank you for it afterwards, that will say, oh my God, that was so good. It really helped me with this thing in my life. So think of one person, think of how to break it to them, how to message them on Facebook, on WhatsApp, give them a call, go by their house, and do spread the word because it's live, it's free, it's happening this week. Next week it will be over. With everything said, I think I don't want to wait anymore. I want to hear what people have to ask and what do you have to say, Patricia? So giving it over to you.
Thank you, Virginia. Thank you for being here. And thanks and welcome everyone for this Q&A session. So these Q&A sessions that have been running for the past 2 days and will be running for the rest of the week are here to serve you as a place to continue digesting what has come up during the sessions so far. Could be technical, could also be a little bit about sharing what has come up for you. These are not necessarily private interventions or a full session for someone, but we can definitely offer a little bit of guidance around things that might be needing a little bit of an enzyme to digest. So welcome, and you are free to type in the question in the chat. If you don't want your name to be on the chat, that's perfectly fine, and you can private message me or Virginia, and she will send them over to me so that you can have also an option to be more private when you send your question. Also, this usually happens in groups where like a little bit embarrassed to share a question, even if it's not that personal. But I always encourage people, if it's already there, if the question's already popping up, it might be helpful for other people as well. And this is going to be this is actually being recorded, so it might be helpful for someone who might listen later. Yeah. So while we wait for questions to come into the chat.
Oh, sorry, Patricia, there was already a question, but I think you came in after that. So let me repost that in the chat. I'll copy paste it.
Mm-hmm.
I apologize. I didn't think that if you come after somebody types, you won't be able to see it. There you go.
In your lecture on emotional abuse, you talk about the effect of when the mother, for example, didn't stick up for you against the abusive father. Yes. What about in the situation where your mother did stick up for you, but she was then also emotionally abused herself in the past or herself by the father? What do you think the effect is of when you see your protector is also powerless? This is also a cause for trauma. This vision, I mean, I will share one example that is relatively frequent, even when it's not as evident as, for example, the situation that I used in the example, just to get everyone in the same example and session. We were talking about how in an abusive situation, in violence in the household, there is a trauma wound from the violence received. We used an example from the father, but we also mentioned the layer of complexity added by the mother who's there, but not doing anything to stop it, and how that adds another trauma wound, and that's another layer that also needs to be addressed. And that's where the question is making reference to. And I was going to share this other example that's not necessarily related to abuse in these types of sense of things that happen within the house, but there is also type of trauma wound that I have seen when the father, I mean, I see it relatively frequently here in Mexico, because there was a very severe economic crisis not very long ago. So let's say about a little bit over 20 years ago. So a lot of people were in contact with this financial crisis one way or another. And the deep effect that this financial crisis had, it was a national thing. Lots of people who had some sort of debt went like into serious, sometimes unreachable debt. And the fact that some people who were children at this point saw their parents go through this financial, and of course emotional, right? But deep financial struggle, and seeing them as powerless, using this word that came in the question, is something that people still have to deal with in their adult stage. So again, it's not necessarily always related to abuse, but seeing their figure of power, of sustenance as powerless, can also be triggering. Of course, there's, as always, like the subtle sides of things and how much and where, and there's no one size fits all. And always with trauma, one situation does not affect everyone, not even in the same household in the same way. So much less what happens to us worldwide, right? But this effect of seeing the protector, the question is, what do you think the effect of when you see your protector as powerless? One of the things that can come up, and speaking in general sense, is that this figure that is supposed to be your support and your defense against the world when you feel defenseless, not because you're defenseless from an emotional wound or something, just because as a child you are defenseless. So it's very important. I think yesterday, was it probably during the Q&A session, I mentioned that parents are the most important source of resourcefulness, of safety for the child. So when this image is affected in some ways, it affects the sensation of safety in the child. So that's the first thing that I would address with this exploration of what is the effect of seeing your protector powerless. This would be like the general gateway into this exploration, and then seeing how that affected the child. This is when we will see like the concrete trauma responses. So one is, for example, one off the top of my head, is the child will feel a constant feeling of unsafety, even as an adult. Like there's something that will come out of nowhere because I never got a strong sense of something that's buffering the external world and me. So a constant sense of uncertainty, or a fear that something is gonna happen at any time that I can control. And another example of how this sensation of feeling unsafe from this power figure, from them not being there, is the going into states of, I don't want to call them behaviors. They are behaviors, but they are connected to a sensation. So they're just not, it's not just a thing that we do, but a very common thing is people who will go into, now there's no adult in the house, now I'm going to be the adult. And what do these children do? They take care of things that are beyond their reach at their age. So an example of this would be, hey mom, I noticed that there's no more bread in the refrigerator. Should we go buy that tomorrow? So the child is already attuned to extra needs. Of course, just checking if there's enough bread in the refrigerator is not necessarily an indicator of trauma, of course, but this attunement to things that should pertain to an adult, the child starts taking responsibility for that. Worrying too much about money, worrying about time, worrying about resources, or worrying about their parents' emotional state. So if they see in this sensation of powerless, if they see that it's the mother who is constantly feeling powerless because they have an emotionally abusive mother themselves. So the grandmother is usually like saying stuff that makes the mother feel powerless. The child might go like, oh mom, I did this for you so that you're happy. Or I took care of this because mom will be upset if she sees that, you know, that the mailman came in late. And so the child will take care of that for the mother. Again, it's not that taking care of the mail is a trauma response in itself, but doing it with a deep sensation of my safety is at play if I don't take charge of that, because my mom will be affected by that. Make sense? Yeah. To the person who sent this question, is this landing somewhere around? Yeah. Okay. Wonderful. So we took like a general base and ideas of how I would explore how that trauma response shows up in their lives. Yeah. from the family constellation perspective, one of the biggest thing that I see that is helpful for children is when their parents standing there in their power. This is a powerful thing to say, right? And it does not mean I have figured out all of my stuff, I am perfectly clean up, I have no fears, I have everything under, under control. But it's knowing I don't have everything figured out, but I am here. I am willing to be present with everything as it shows up. Just this attitude detonates the most amazing effect on the children. Great. Something else coming up? Another question? The same may happen if the mother has unprocessed trauma herself and becomes overprotective towards her child. Yes. What we see from a systemic vision, which is, from a systemic vision, when the mother overprotects their children, even if she's constantly there and constantly taking care of stuff, the child perceives that this is coming from unsafety and fear. So even if the mother is trying to make them feel safe and make them not feel fear, the underlying truth, and the child perceives this as the intelligence of the system, is the world is a terrible place and you're unprotected. So it's a very confusing thing for children. Yeah. Any more questions, or maybe just insights that you had over the week that you want to share? Doesn't necessarily have to be a question.
And you can also raise your electronic hand if you'd like to unmute.
This may be a transgenerational thing in my family. I can see 3 generations of trauma like that. Yes. I don't know if you saw the panel on transgenerational trauma we had 2 days ago. And yeah, that's one of the things that I mentioned. And actually I mentioned it also in yesterday's session, the hidden things of trauma, the trauma that we don't see. These transgenerational things. A session that I had relatively recently, a person always felt that the mother was highly protective of them. And I asked her, like, why would that make sense, right? And she was like, no reason. We lived in the city, not like in a dangerous area where that would make sense. Nothing major. And looking into the generational stories, we came to find a story where her grandmother, I don't know if it was the grandmother or the great grandmother, but somewhere around that. And given that in that age, during those years in Mexico, women, like my grandmother, was married at 15. So I mean, between grandmother and mother, there's not that much difference. But the story was that during the Mexican Revolution, people came into the house. They took the grandfather or the partner of this woman, let's say it was the grandmother. They took him away and he disappeared for a long time. And they took most of their belongings, and she found herself without a way to sustain herself and her children for some time. She eventually found a way to figure out how to solve that. But then we saw like how it made sense for the mother to be protective. And she said, actually, one of the ways that I knew that my mother was very fearful of protection was because she locked up the door with like 10 locks. And she says, when I saw my mother do that, it seemed so insane. Like, why do you need so many locks? But when you hear the story of people actually coming in, breaking in through the house, it makes sense. So it's incredibly like it's mysterious or so subtle, but it's so clear. And this person that was the one that was doing the session, so it was like the third generation, she had no recall of this. It wasn't the most significant story that she had heard. She had heard of it at some point. That's why she was able to share that with me. But it wasn't a story that resonated with her as something that was that big that happened in the family stories. And yet for her, it was experiencing this fear of going into life because mother, through all of this overprotectiveness, showed her that there was something to be afraid of. It's very interesting to find out these intergenerational stories, because it's one story that represented so much for a person in our system at some point, and it has its way to come up again. What are the effects of emotionally absent parents? I want to see how I can narrow that answer into one short answer. There are many, many, many ways of how this can show up. And it's such a wide topic, such a wide topic. One effect that's very common to see when there are emotionally absent parents is a lack of a sense of identity. How does that show up? In many ways. Self-doubt, not knowing what I want to do with my life, doubting when I choose what I do with my life, a lack of an ability to find what I want to do and find it with connecting to my passion, accepting relationships that are not really what nurtures me, because I have no connection to knowing what I want and what fits me, because I was never fed. I think these are, to me, the ones that are at the core of the lack of emotionally present parents. But also, I mean, it can show up in smaller ways, not of course less important, but to me, these are like the core things where more of those smaller stuff will stem from. What do you think are the long-term effects of a child or teenager taking on more adult responsibility or worry? Number one thing that shows up for this dynamic in childhood is not being able to care for myself, because my sense of safety, my cared state depended on me caring for others. So that constant looking outside is replicated in adulthood. So whether these people go into being therapists, psychologists, many psychologists have this dynamic. We come from this usually, because that ability is already set or tuned into. It's not wrong, it's not bad, but it's important to clean that up so that it comes out with just like the good stuff, and it doesn't, we use an expression in Spanish, your cables are not crossed when you're talking to a person, right? It's not necessarily bad, but it's people who will usually go into professions of care, doctors, nurses, teachers, because there's already a very natural ability to tune into others. This is not necessarily, again, a bad thing, but when the lack of care for myself is there, that's when it becomes a problem. Because why overwork? Because burnout, resentment, if we don't get to those extremes of physical exhaustion, resentment is present in a lot of us, not because we're bad people or we're selfish people, just because the body has a natural constant measurement of reciprocity in relationships. And whenever that fails to balance out, resentment is bound to come. It's a natural reaction that's telling us, you're doing something too much of something in this relationship. Just like that, it doesn't necessarily mean you are an overgiver. That's sort of sometimes an expression that is used. It can be, but sometimes being very giving is not a bad thing. The bad thing is giving too much where there is no reciprocity. Yeah. Yeah, that's why I'm very careful with the words that I use. So yeah, we could say, oh, these people are overachievers, perfectionists, overgivers. But I don't like to see when people are like, oh, so I'm not gonna give again because I see that my mother used to take advantage of this, and then my partner did, my husband or my ex-husband, classically, right? So I'm not gonna do it again, and I'm not gonna give. But giving gives us such a beautiful sense of being, of completion. And it would be terrible in my perspective to take that away, right? So a more mature perspective would be, how do I own my giving as a thing that I like and that comes naturally through my body? But how do I add discernment? How do I add reciprocity? How do I add the ability to receive? Yes, those are the good questions. It's easier to just say, I'm not going to give anything to anyone. Nobody's going to take advantage of me anymore. That's the easy version. And it's not easy, I know. But it's much easier than actually installing these filters into our lives. Receiving is the most difficult. Yes. Yeah. I find in my exploration of receiving that it's one of the best things, that it's the best things to explore through embodiment. Because receiving just from the mind can come as convincing yourself that it's good to receive. And that sometimes shows up in a lot of people as entitlement, as I should be receiving as well, and the world owes me, right? When it's just through the mind, and it's not from this softening and access to vulnerability that are the doorways to receiving. There's also a key component in receiving that's also greatly explored through embodiment, where I say, I know that I know it within my body, that I have the ability to say, I'm open to receive, but I can say no when it's something that I don't like. I am open to receive, but I can tell you, hey, yes, but not that way. And sometimes when we don't have access to this, which may be a result of course, a lot of traumas from our childhood, then it's best not to receive. It makes sense. It makes sense, particularly if what we received was harmful. It was best to just close all of the doors, right? All of them. But love, but affection, no, this is too dangerous. Close it up. It makes sense. So the process of seeing how much we open, where do we open, to whom do we open to, right? It makes it difficult to feel you deserve help. In my experience, I often feel like I should just be able to do things and feel guilty asking for help. Yeah, it's not an easy process. That's why I encourage people to go into this receiving exploration through the body. We are almost out of time. Thank you for these beautiful questions. I think they're very nurturing here. I'm sorry that we missed a question that came in through a direct message. if you're able to show up tomorrow, I would love to take that, and follow up on that for sure. We will have a Q&A same time tomorrow and Friday still. So thank you everyone for showing up. I'm very thankful for your presence, for your questions, and for your opening. Thank you, Eloy, for being here. Virginia?
And there is a question there. Did you explain somewhere how we can learn this through the body? There is lots of ways. I just want to bring to the attention of people that we do have the course as well, which we're offering. And we wanted this to be super, super accessible. So I'll paste the links there in the chat. And if you're not on the Zoom room, so you can't see the chat, you can check out www.embodimentunlimited.com/trauma-summit. Sorry, I've got the wrong link. That's not good. My perfectionism is hitting red bells. So it's www.embodimentunlimited.com/trauma-is-your-superpower. And you can have a look at that in terms of seeing how to access some power through the body. And in the meantime, yeah, thank you all for coming. I'll paste the links in the chat. That was just for the benefit of those watching in other channels and not here in the Zoom room with us. Do tell one friend. Thank you, Patricia. We'll see you again tomorrow. And we've got also Patricia and Daniela coming up after this one. So just let me quickly share my screen here and show you some more of the titles coming up. We've got like about 1 minute left. There we go. Technology is really not helping me today, Patricia. I think it's moodling on everything we've been through. So there we go. We've got Patricia and Daniela on taking the stick out of your beep trauma and perfectionism. That's for me. And then again, Patricia is at 9 o'clock UK on why you're anxious. And then Mark will be talking about subtle trauma and how to find your life purpose, and loads of good sessions still up until Saturday. So you do have time to tell people to take a break, not get stuck on the screen, and we'll see you on one of the next ones. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Patricia.
Thank you, Virginia. One just quick tip for closing. If we want to do receiving, what's one thing that you can give and find yourself to receive, either from you or actually recognize when you receive something, even if it's the mail from the mailman? Hey, thank you. Just one quick thing today that we can do. Bye-bye.